My name is Rafa. And for as long as I can remember, I have lived with a feeling I could never quite name. It wasn't loneliness exactly. I knew loneliness. I grew up in a group home on the outskirts of Columbus, Ohio, and loneliness was just the air we breathed there. This was something different. This was more like an echo. Like I kept calling out into an empty room, and the walls kept almost answering back. I was abandoned when I was 3 days old, left at a fire station in Columbus, in a cardboard box lined with a yellow blanket. That's what the social worker told me when I was 12, the first time I asked. I remember sitting across from her in that small office that smelled like old paper and asking, "Was there a note?" She shook her head. No note, no name, no explanation. Just a yellow blanket and a baby who didn't know yet that she was alone. The group home wasn't a bad place. I want to be fair about that. The women who ran it tried their best. We had food, we had beds, we had a small TV in the common room that we all fought over on Friday nights. But what we didn't have, what I never had, was that specific kind of safety that comes from being truly known by another person. The kind where someone looks at you across the breakfast table and already knows you didn't sleep well. The kind that doesn't need words. Psychologists call this felt security, a deep embodied sense that someone in the world holds you in mind. It's built in the first years of life, through thousands of small moments of attunement between a child and their caregiver. When those moments are absent, the nervous system learns a different lesson, that you are fundamentally on your own. That lesson can last a lifetime. I grew up carrying that lesson in my body. I was never the girl who cried at movies. I was the girl who watched other people cry and felt a quiet, confused envy. I didn't understand what they were accessing, some deep reservoir of feeling that I couldn't reach. My counselor at the home once told me I had a wall around my heart. I told her I thought that was a cliché. She smiled and said, "Clichés become clichés because they keep being true." She was right. I just didn't know it yet. The other thing I should tell you about me is the birthmark. On my left shoulder, there's a mark about the size of a coin. Reddish-brown, shaped a little bit like a bird mid-flight. Wings open. I always hated it as a kid. The other kids called it the smudge. But as I got older, it became something private, something mine. The one thing on my body that felt like it might mean something. I was 17 the summer everything changed. The home organized an adoption fair. I know the name sounds like something out of a bad movie, but that's really what they called it. Families who were thinking about adopting older kids could come and spend the afternoon with us. There was food, music, little activity stations set up around the courtyard. We were supposed to mingle. I spent most of the first hour leaning against a wall eating a small piece of cornbread and pretending to look at my phone. I was good at that, at making myself invisible in the middle of a crowd. It was a survival skill I'd developed over years. If you don't let people see you, they can't look away from you either. This is what attachment researchers call an avoidant coping strategy. Children who learn that their emotional needs won't be consistently met often stop signaling those needs altogether. Not because the needs disappear, but because reaching out has historically caused more pain than staying hidden. It's not coldness. It's grief that learned to disguise itself as independence. I was mid-bite into my second piece of cornbread when I felt it. A strange prickling at the back of my neck. The kind of physical sensation that doesn't make logical sense but that your body registers before your brain catches up. I lowered my phone and looked up slowly, scanning the courtyard. And then I saw her. She was standing about 30 feet away near the drink table, talking to one of the younger kids from the home. She had her back to me. Dark curly hair, same height as me, same way of holding her shoulders, slightly forward, like she was used to making herself a little smaller than she was. My heart did something I don't have a word for. Not a skip. More like a lurch. like it recognized something before the rest of me could. Then she turned around. I don't know if you've ever looked in a mirror in a dark room, and then the light comes on suddenly. That sudden, almost violent recognition of your own face, but also the weird dislocation, because the reflection is doing something you're not doing. That is the closest thing I can describe to what happened when that girl turned around and I saw her face. It was my face. Not similar. Not, oh, you two could be sisters. My face. My exact nose. My exact jaw. The same asymmetry in my left eyebrow that I had spent years being self-conscious about. She was looking somewhere to my left, so she hadn't seen me yet. And I stood there, cornbread frozen halfway to my mouth, feeling the entire world tilt 10 degrees. Some meetings don't feel like coincidences. They feel like answers. My legs moved before I made a decision to move them. I crossed the courtyard in what felt like both 3 seconds and 3 years. When I was close enough, I said, and I'm not proud of how articulate this was, "Hey." She turned, and watched her own eyes go wide in a stranger's face. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then she said, very quietly, "You have the birthmark." I grabbed my own left shoulder instinctively. "How do you know about?" She pulled aside the collar of her shirt. On her left shoulder. A mark the size of a coin, reddish-brown. Shaped like a bird in mid-flight, wings open. Identical. Perfect. Mirror. Her name was Jules, short for Juliana. She had grown up on a farm outside of Knoxville, Tennessee, raised by a couple who had adopted her as an infant. She had always known she was adopted. She had always known, felt, she said, more than known, that there was someone else. "I used to dream about a girl who looked like me," she told me, her voice very low and steady, like she was trying hard not to crack. "Since I was little, I always thought it was just, I don't know, a wish." "It wasn't a wish," I said. "No," she agreed. "It wasn't." The people at the adoption fair noticed something was happening. The staff gathered around us, quietly, the way adults do when they sense a moment they shouldn't interrupt, but also can't bring themselves to walk away from. Someone brought us chairs. Someone else brought water. Jules and I sat across from each other and talked for 4 hours without stopping. We talked fast, then slow, then fast again. We compared everything. The way we both clicked our tongues when we were thinking. The fact that we both hated the texture of overripe banana, but loved banana when it was still a little green. The recurring dream we had both had since childhood, of a yellow room with a window that looked out onto nothing. A yellow room. A yellow blanket. Twin research has produced some of the most remarkable findings in all of psychology. Identical twins raised apart, with no shared environment, no shared upbringing, consistently show startling similarities. The same quirks of personality, the same fears, the same sense of humor, even the same nervous habits. This is partly genetic. But researchers believe something else is also at work. A kind of somatic memory, a body-level knowing, that persists even when conscious memory has nothing to anchor to. We remember more than we think we do. And sometimes, the body remembers first. There was one moment I'll never forget. We were about an hour into talking and Jules suddenly went very quiet. She was looking at her hands in her lap. Then she said, "Did you ever feel like you were grieving something you couldn't name? Like you lost something before you were old enough to understand loss?" I felt my throat close. "Every day," I said. "My whole life." She nodded. "Me too. Even on the farm, even with my parents, who are wonderful, I need you to know that they are genuinely wonderful people. I had this background sadness, like a frequency I couldn't turn off. My mom used to worry about me, I never knew how to explain it to her. Because the words would have been, "I'm missing half of myself," I said. The silence after that was the most comfortable silence I had ever sat inside. In psychology, there is a concept called ambiguous loss, grief for something whose absence can't be clearly named or mourned. Adoptees, especially those separated from siblings, often carry this kind of grief. It doesn't look like grief from the outside. It looks like restlessness, like a low hum of anxiety, like a persistent sense that the life you're living is somehow incomplete. Healing often begins not with resolution, but with naming. By the end of that afternoon, we had exchanged numbers, agreed to meet the following weekend, and made a silent, mutual pact, communicated entirely through the way we hugged goodbye, long and slightly desperate, that we were never going to lose each other again. The paperwork took months. DNA tests, legal consultations, conversations with caseworkers and counselors on both sides. But the tests only confirmed what our bodies had known the moment we turned to face each other in that courtyard. We were twins, born on the same night, separated at 3 days old. Our mother, whoever she was, had left us in 2 different places. A blanket at a wildfire station in Columbus, and another child delivered somehow to the steps of a church near a small town outside Knoxville. 2 babies. 1 night. Reasons we'll probably never fully know. I won't pretend I wasn't angry. I was. I am. Some nights I still am. 17 years of that background sadness, of that echoing feeling, of searching the faces of strangers in crowds and not knowing what I was looking for. 17 years of Jules waking up on that farm and feeling, in spite of everything she had, that something was missing. Grief and gratitude aren't opposites. I've learned that. You can hold both. People always ask me, what was it like getting to know someone who is essentially you? And I always have to pause before I answer, because the question contains an assumption that turns out to be beautifully wrong. Jules is not me. She is my mirror, but a mirror shows you a reflection, not a copy. We share a face, a birthmark, a set of genes, and a specific shade of laughter that our caseworker once described as aggressively contagious. But we are different people. She is warmer than me, quicker to trust. She grew up with parents who modeled secure attachment, and it shows. She moves through the world with an ease that I'm still learning. I am more guarded, more analytical, more likely to process something through writing before I can talk about it. Erik Erikson described identity as something that forms in the tension between who we are inside and who we are reflected back to be by the world. For adoptees, especially those who grow up without biological mirrors, without faces that look like theirs, without shared stories or inherited traits, this process can be profoundly destabilizing. Meeting a biological sibling isn't just emotional. It is, in a deep sense, ontological. It changes the answer to the question, who am I? The strangest and most beautiful thing about meeting Jules wasn't the similarities. It was what the similarities taught me about the differences. For the first time in my life, I could look at a quality in myself, my guardedness, my tendency to go quiet when I'm overwhelmed, and see it refracted through someone who had the same raw material, but built something different with it. Which meant my guardedness wasn't destiny. It was a response, a learned thing. And learned things can be unlearned. I cried for the first time in years the night after I met her. I'm talking about really cried, the kind that comes from somewhere below the throat, the kind that surprises you with how physical it is. I think it was relief. The specific, overwhelming relief of being finally genuinely seen. Jules was proof, in the most literal biological sense, that I had not always been alone. That on the very first night of my life, there had been another heartbeat right next to mine. We were never strangers. We were just separated. Jules's parents, my parents now, in whatever way I let myself claim that word, drove 6 hours onin to meet me 2 months after the adoption fair. Her mother cried before she even got out of the car. Her father shook my hand, then looked at me for a long moment and said, "We always wondered if there was another one." I'm living on my farm in Tennessee now part of the time. The rest of the time I'm back in Columbus and finishing school. Jules and I text approximately 900 times a day. She sends me voice messages when she's driving, long winding ones that zigzag between 3 different topics before arriving somewhere I didn't expect. I've started sending them back. This is enormous. I was not before a person who sent voice messages. We're in therapy, separately and together. There's a therapist who specializes in late discovery adoptees and reunited siblings, and she has given us a framework that I find both terrifying and necessary. Grief before integration. You don't get to skip the part where you mourn what was lost. Psychologist Pauline Boss, who coined the term ambiguous loss, writes that healing doesn't require resolution or closure. It requires meaning-making. The loss doesn't go away, but we can build a life large enough to hold it. We can find ways to carry it that don't require us to carry it alone. Some days I look at Jules across the kitchen table of that farmhouse, her doing her homework, me pretending to do mine, and I feel something I spent 17 years not being able to feel. It isn't happiness exactly, though happiness is part of it. It's more like coherence. Like the story that was always trying to tell itself through me finally has a shape I can hold in both hands. I used to think the missing feeling was a wound, but I think now it was also something else. It was the exact shape of her. The whole that had a shape all along, and the shape was a person. My person. My sister. If you have ever felt that background sadness, that echo in an empty room, I want you to hear this. You are not broken. You are not too much or too little. You are someone whose story isn't finished yet, and sometimes the missing piece has been looking for you too. The science is clear. Human beings are wired for connection. Not just any connection. Specific, attuned, reciprocal belonging. When that belonging is interrupted, we carry the absence in our nervous systems like a frequency we can't name. But the nervous system remains plastic. It can learn new lessons. At any age, in any circumstance, a single genuine relationship, one person who truly sees you, can begin to rewrite what the body learned about being alone. It is never too late to be found.